Loading. All right, in that case, we're gonna get started. All right. So this computer, okay. Now we're good. Okay, so today is going to be kind of a fun one, less of a technical one. The last two were pretty technical. And this is just going to go over some extra little things that you can do with Fusion to make things look prettier. Next week is going to be a big make things prettier week. But this is just extra sort of 2D and 2.5D things that you can do in Fusion that'll either help you make your designs look more interesting or make them look a little bit more professional, or also will help you label things. So a lot of the times on products, we need to label safety information, or we need to put some kind of sticker on it, or we need to emboss something into it or onto it. And it's helpful to know how to do that because that is sort of part of the product, even if it doesn't necessarily support the mechanical function of it. And we're going to do that via the Monopoly game. If you look up the original Monopoly game, the original patent is held by a woman. It looks very different from what we are used to today. And this one also looks very different. I will kind of explain some of the creative liberties that I took. You'll also notice that it's somewhat incomplete. I'm going to put the link to this in the description so people can go ahead and complete it itself. And I'm actually going to do some like live CAD here and there to just show you how to do some of these basic 2 and 2.5D operations. So without further ado, also, if people want to contribute, that is also a cool thing to do. And I'll explain that in a second. Without further ado, let's jump into software. Okay. And as you can see, I'm like mid-CAD here. Okay. We're going to exit out of this guy because she was giving me problems, and that's okay. It happens. So the first thing we're going to do actually is I like having sort of a dark background personally in Fusion because that's what I'm used to. You can very easily change that in the environment settings, especially if you're trying to show someone something. It's usually more helpful to have it in photo booth. That way you can see the real distinctions between those. The other thing is the automatic colors that things go into are usually pretty dark gray or light gray and all of that, and they just start blending into the background sometimes. So this is our Monopoly board. As you'll see, we have this sort of first row done, and together we're going to complete a little bit more of it. And I'm using a couple different little techniques here to put things on the board and make them look a certain way. First things first, obviously the way that we built this is nothing super interesting. We're just making a sketch. It's a 20-inch by 20-inch board. If you're curious, that's the actual dimension. And then we just create a sketch on top of that. That's this guy here. This sketch isn't extruded and it won't be extruded. Obviously, if you want to have actual lines in there, you can do that. But we don't necessarily need that. These actually serve a different purpose. The other thing you'll notice, though, that's important is they're all complete boxes. Normally there are nine properties in a row here. We've reduced that slightly. It's down to 6, just because these are bigger, so it's easier to see things, clarity, and it makes it a little bit more fun. So the first thing that we want to do is actually this central portion right here. Obviously, we could go in and we could grab the logo and we could emboss that or something like that, and we could do all of those things. Alternatively, we could do what I did here if you want to be a little bit more creative and have something super custom. And if you have the right materials and the right tools to do it, you can actually put this on as a decal. And a decal is effectively a sticker. In Fusion 360, they don't have a thickness. But I think in most scenarios, not all, but most scenarios, the thickness of stickers is relatively negligible. So you can think of a decal as a thickness less sticker, sure. And they're nice if you want to design something on your own, or you want to put a logo on something that isn't necessarily going to serve the function, but serves the aesthetic and brings a point across, especially if you are demoing a product or a design to people that are maybe not as technical, who might be thinking of other things such as safety. Having decals on there with safety indications, or for marketing folks, having logoing and branding on there might actually be super helpful. In this case, if we were to actually make this product, printing this out on like a vinyl printer cutter or something along those lines is probably going to be the move, because obviously I wasn't very colorful here, but if I wanted a fun, colorful middle, then I could do that. This is just a very bare bones kind of thing. And you'll see here, these two slots, I also used decals. The really nice thing about them is when I want to plop in a decal, say we want like a community chest over here, if I remember the board correctly, there's usually a community chest here. We can just go to insert decal, and I'm going to jump into here, grab my community chest. It's asking me for a face. And then I'm just going to flip it over. And all I really have to do is resize it. Because this isn't actually something that supports the function, and I don't care as much with this particular design, we can just sort of make it fit. Obviously, if it was more functional, we would pay a little bit more attention to that. But that's the beauty of doing things creatively, right? And obviously this isn't quite centered. If I wanted to get it centered, I could just move it with these arrows, or type in actual values for where I wanted to move it. So now we have that. The next thing that we're going to do is, over in our create menu, we have emboss. And emboss essentially just lets us raise or lower surfaces. So you'll see here, I have some text. This is unironically named Emboss Boulevard. And if I wanted to, for example, engrave or mill out this text, what I could do to do that, so that I could go in then into manufacture and draw out an actual toolpath, because then it would be a 3D design just like this Go, which we'll talk about in a second. All I would have to do is pop over to emboss. The important thing about emboss is you can't emboss something like a line. It has to be a sort of closed, independent sketch, if that makes sense. So text is fine. You can see that the text has a thickness to it, whereas lines technically don't. So that's something that you can pay attention to. Obviously, there are ways around that. You can draw things as rectangles. You can, in some circumstances, you can use the thicken tool. But text is fine. So we're going to select our sketch profile. We're going to select our face. And my computer's been a little chuggy recently, but it looks like we got it. And then it's essentially asking us if we want to emboss or deboss, so going up or down. And it's going to give us a depth, and then we can do some more fun things with alignment. Usually these are completely fine as 0 inches for the majority of what you're going to do. Once we're happy with how that looks, we can click OK, and my computer will panic slightly. And then now we have, because we chose emboss instead of deboss, we have this nice little raised surface. So we could cut that out with a mill. We could 3D print this whole board, I guess. That would be a big 3D printer. We could 3D print these letters and slap them on the board, something like that. So then there's another way that you can kind of get text or pictures on here. This is just a sketch, as you can see here. It's just a sketch. But a lot of the times, or sometimes, we'll encounter a situation where we want to sketch something out that already exists, and we don't want to sort of try to design it from scratch. And that's where canvases become really helpful. So a canvas is similar to a decal, but the idea of a canvas is that it's a separate entity from the product. So decal is something that would go onto your design. A canvas is something that could go onto your design, but it's technically not part of the design. It enhances either the CADing experience by giving you something to trace, or it enhances the user experience. So if somebody, you can see the example they have in the pop-up, somebody wants to sort of compare what something would look like in real life with materials versus the actual CAD design. That's where it becomes helpful. So right now I have my canvas, I have the visual on my canvas turned off. If I go ahead and turn that on, you can see that I have that right there. This guy goes down exactly the same as our decals go. And then all we have to do is sort of size it how we want it. If we want to be more technical about that, you can actually set scaling factors, you can set distances and opacity and all of that. Again, this is a very informal thing. So I just kind of eyeballed it. And the same goes for the sketch that we do over here. You can see that really it's just a bunch of lines going around. There are no real dimensions because this is already sort of blown up to the size that I want. The only thing that I did do so that it looked a little bit cleaner, I used the equal dimension quite a bit, especially on these arrow portions that are symmetric. And then parallel quite a bit, obviously, because these are just, you can see these are all just parallel and perpendicular relationship. And then I have a couple of collinear relationships between the G and the O, so they sort of line up. And that's an easy way that you can do things like that. So if I can exit out of Sketch, chugging. Exit out of Sketch, if I wanted to insert a decal, go back into my Monopoly, and I wanted to put in free parking. I select my face. I'm gonna just scooch over to this side. This is obviously a little bit bigger than I want it to be, so I'm gonna size it down, and I'm gonna move it. All right, gonna move it over. This is too far, but I think a ½ inch each way actually. And 0.5. That's too far. 0. Minus 0.125. That's good enough. Okay. Now I have this decal on here. Again, it's not super part of my, or sorry, I have the canvas here. It's not part of my product. It's just, unless, oh, I brought it in as a decal. I lied, one sec. Canvas, insert, free parking. So now you can see the difference is when I'm doing canvases, I can plop them straight onto these squares. And that makes things a little bit easier. So I'm just going to turn this because I think this is the orientation that it is in the game. We think. And then I'm going to scale it down by 0.75 maybe. Sure. Okay. Now that I have this here, I can go into my regular sketch. I'm gonna rotate this. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and sketch this guy out. So the last one was pretty, I don't know. We had a lot of 90-degree angles. Everything was fairly straightforward. This is a little bit more of a freestyle drawing. So something that can help a lot in this case is a spline, which is somewhat hard to explain, but essentially a spline is just a interesting curvy line made up of a lot of points and a lot of arcs. That sort of lets you just get away with stuff that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to get away with. So what I can do is sort of move along here and create like a trillion points, which I can go back and edit if I don't like how it looks later. And then if I have like a nice straight bit here, and you can see that it's sort of arcing or being straight as well. Yeah, basically it's a bunch of little tiny arcs. It's hard to talk and do things at the same time. It's a bunch of little tiny arcs, and we're just sort of making those up as we go. And when we go in to actually edit this, it actually is like you're editing a bunch of circles, obviously, because an arc is a portion of a circle. And this is really good for freeform stuff. Generally, in the real world, you wouldn't want this many points on a spline if you could avoid it. But A, because this is just something that, you know, could be laser cut or laser engraved. And B, because this is artsy, we're okay with it. So I'm just gonna finish out, make the circles, grab this. So what I'm gonna do here is pretty common ancient AutoCAD technique, Autodesk technique. Press and hold and shift. And that way I don't have to exit out of my line tool to be able to jump into an arc. And that's convenient, and I think a lot of people forget that that's there, or at least a lot of me forgets that that's there. And sometimes you have to think of head because you can't press release and then shift, because that'll just start another line. So that's something, you know, that's fun for sketching. And now we have our little car. So if we turn off our decal, if we turn off the visibility of our decal, it's pretty close. Obviously it's not exactly the same. But yeah, we have our little car. And then if we wanted to go in, we could emboss this. So grab, let's say grab this guy. I have to think about how I want to do this. Okay. So we're going to emboss multiple levels. So we're going to grab that guy and emboss that by, let's say, 0.02. Oh, so don't use 2 decimal places because the software will get confused, but also I will. Let's see. Okay, it wants us to go negative 0.03. All right. So we're going to emboss that. It's going to take 2.5 seconds to do that. All right, so now we have this raised surface, but our sketch disappeared, which is fine. We just have to find our sketch and turn the invisibility back on. This is a setting that you can change, by the way. Usually having the sketches disappear once you extrude them works out in your favor. But if that's not your preference, if you want to maintain visibility of your sketches even after you've extruded them, you can go up to your preferences and change that. I'm not going to because I don't CAD like that, but I respect people who do. So we're gonna leave the window in, and we're gonna bring this donut out a bit. Okay, select the face, and we're gonna bring this guy out. And this is just so we can tell which direction is negative, really, because sometimes I don't know. And then we're going to do this 0.05. Last results failed. Oh, we love that. Okay, I'm going to do this. Oh, we love it. We love to see it. Sometimes things just don't work. And it's not Kelly CAD's fault. It's just your fault. I'm okay with this. We can go back and change our emboss, so we can add surfaces if we want to. It's not going to let me add these wheels right here because they aren't closed shapes, because I CAD'd it very jankily. But if we wanted to also add in this guy, we could. For now, I think it's fine enough. Okay. Anyway, that is more or less everything. That's a good start. Essentially, you could then go around the board and start adding in and populating all of these things, either by adding decals. So like a technique might be just to print out a bunch of chance and community chest stickers and then plop those around. And also, you know, engraving things. So maybe you could do this all in one go on something like a gantry router or a laser cutter, add your decals, and then you have a custom chessboard, which is pretty cool. So that's all I have as far as CAD demoing goes. Does anyone have questions before we close this one out? Okay. I'm going to assume that's a no. So we're going to wrap up. Thanks so much for showing up and enjoy your evening.